Hi, welcome to the Gemara on Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. We're starting immediately following the Mishnah. Tana, we learned in a Braita, Masha en ken b'Torah. This is not the case when it comes to Torah. So at the very beginning of the Mishnah said that you can read Megillah sitting or standing, and the Gemara tells us, as Rashi says, Masha en ken b'Torah, she'in korin b'Torah b'tzibor miyushav. And when you read Torah b'tzibor, when you have the public Torah reading, you can't do that reading sitting down. So this is different from Megillah. Menahani milei, from where do we know this? Amar Rabbi Abahu ze Amar Kra. Rabbi Abahu says we have a pasuk that says Va'ata po amodi madi. God says to Moshe, in preparation for revelation, you stand here with me. So that's a proof that you have to be standing to receive revelation, to learn Torah. The Amar Rabbi Abahu, here's another statement of Rabbi Abahu's, Ilmale mikra katuv, Efshar le'amro kiviyachol, Afa kadosh baruch hu ba'midah. If it were not for the fact, if it hadn't been for the fact that this is a written pasuk, it would be impossible to say such a thing, because it is as if kiviyachol, as it were, even God is standing. Amodi madi, stand here with me. The implication, according to Rabbi Abahu, is that God is also standing and telling Moshe to stand. So we couldn't say such a thing about God, that God stands in a place, because it's too anthropomorphic. So were this not a written pasuk, we would not be able to say this. The Amar Rabbi Abahu, here's another statement of Rabbi Abahu, Minayin l'rav shelo yoshev al gavei mitah v'yeshaneha l'talmido al gavei karka. How do we know that a teacher should not sit on a bed, on like a cushion, and teach to his student, while the student is sitting on the floor? Shnei Amar, as it says, Va'ata po amodi madi, because God says to Moshe, you stand here with me. In other words, you're not allowed to have any kind of unequal setup between teacher and student. Rashi clarifies this, I believe. Kiviyachol, Rashi says, Ne'amar b'akadosh baruch hu kiba'adam, right, that we don't usually speak about God the way we speak about people. And shelo yoshev al gabei mitah, Rashi says, Ela o shnehem al gabei mitah, o shnehem al gabei karka. You have to have teacher and student both on the mitah or both on the floor. You can't have an unequal setup for teacher and student, and that's something else that we learn from this verse. Tana Rabbanan, we learn in a Braita, Miyamot Moshe v'ad Rabban Gamliel lo hayu lemedin Torah el me'umad. From the days of Moshe, through the days of Rabban Gamliel, no one would learn Torah except standing up. Everybody who learned Torah did so standing. Mishemet Rabban Gamliel yarad choli le'olam v'hayu lemedin Torah miyushav. But once Rabban Gamliel died, sickness came into the world. Weakness came into the world, and people had to learn Torah sitting down. The Hainu Ditznan, and this is in accordance with that which is taught in the Mishnah, Mishemet Rabban Gamliel batel kfod Torah. From the time that, beginning with the death of Rabban Gamliel, respect for the Torah is nullified, no longer exists in the same way. Katuv echad omer ve'eshev bahar. One pasuk says ve'eshev bahar. That's Moshe. I will sit on the mountain. The katuv echad omer v'anochi amadeti bahar. And another pasuk says I stood on the mountain. So the Gemara's question is really, which was it? Was Moshe sitting or standing? Amarav omed v'lomed yoshev v'shoneh. Moshe would stand and learn the Torah for the first time, and then would sit and repeat it, do chazara on it. That's shoneh. Rabbi Chanina Amar, Rabbi Chanina has a different solution to this problem. Lo omed v'lo yoshev, elo shocheh. No, it's not. Moshe was neither standing nor was he sitting, but he was kind of bowing down, kind of leaning over, presumably because God was present. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Ein yeshiva ela lashon ikva. The language of yeshiva, right, saying va'eshev, that word that sounds kind of like sitting, only means staying or stopping. Ikva is just staying in one place. Shnei Amar, as it says, v'teshvu b'kadesh yamim rabim. They sat in Kadesh for many days, but we, of course, always instinctively translate things like that as they dwelled or they resided, or it doesn't literally mean to sit. And so too, Rabbi Yochanan is saying, This pasuk that says Va'eshev, where Moshe sat on the mountain, he didn't actually sit. That's just where he was located. He dwelled on the mountain, or he stayed on the mountain for a little while. Rava Amar, and Rava says, Rakot me'umad v'kashot miyushav. Moshe stood for the easy halachot and sat down for the very hard halachot. So when the going got tough, Moshe sat down, but the rest of the time he was standing. Okay, moving on in the Mishnah, Kara echad kra'u hashnayim yatsu v'chulei. This idea that you can have multiple readers, you can have more than one reader simultaneously for reading Megillah Esther. Tana, Masha'in ken b'Torah. Same formulation as before. We learned in a Braita. This is not the case when it comes to the Torah. Right? With the Torah, you can't have multiple simultaneous readers. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a Braita. B'Torah echad koreh ve'echad mitargam. When it comes to reading Torah, you have one reader and one translator. Right? They used to do sort of a almost simultaneous translation in shul. One pasuk would be read, and then the mitargaman would translate. So for Torah, you need one reader and one translator. As long as you don't have one reading and two translating, which is a strange formulation, because you would assume that we would be stricter with the reading than with the translating. So we'll look at Rashi here. The kol sheken she'ein shnayim korin. Actually, Rashi says it's really kol sheken. How much more so? Or if you can't have two people translating, how much more so you can't have two people reading simultaneously when it comes to Torah? V'tama mishum detrei kali lo mishtame. And the reason is because we have this halachic principle. It's really applied in other places as well, that two voices cannot be heard. Because when you're fulfilling an obligation on somebody else's behalf, there's a shemea ka'oneh principle. You hear it, and so it's like you said it yourself, but you have to be able to hear it. And the idea in the halacha is that you can really only hear things clearly if one voice is saying it. But if two voices are saying it simultaneously, you're not able to understand it in the same way. You're not able to hear it in the same way. So for Torah reading, you need one reader, one translator. Uvenavi, echad koreh v'shnayim mitargamin. When it comes to Navi, when it comes to reading, let's say the Haftarah, you can have only one reader, but you can have two translators. As long as you don't have two who read and two who translate. So the reading, you still can't have two people, but the translation, you could have two. And Rashi here explains, why can you have two translators for Navi? Because the Targum, the translation, is simply to make it heard, to make it listenable to by the women and the simple people. Who don't speak Hebrew. They don't understand Hebrew. And the Targum is the vernacular of the Bavlis, so it's the language they speak. And we have to be careful and always give the Targum of the Torah because we want them to understand the mitzvot. But when it comes to Navi, there's no mitzvot to be learned there, and so we're not as careful about it. We're not as concerned with it. We're not as careful about it. So you can have two simultaneous translators for Navi, but not for Torah. Uvehalalu Megillah, afilu asara korin ve'asara metargamin. And when it comes to Hallel and Megillah, you can even have 10 people reading and 10 people translating, meaning you could have all that happen simultaneously. You can have simultaneous readers and simultaneous translators for Megillah. This kind of builds off of what we learned in the Mishnah. My taima, what's the reason? Meaning, why are we going to distinguish Megillah from Torah reading, from Haftarah? Why can you have as many simultaneous readers as you want? And the answer is because it's beloved, because everyone loves Hallel, loves Megillah. Megillah, you could say it's a very compelling story. So they're so beloved that everyone will concentrate on it and will hear it clearly. They'll be so careful that they'll hear it clearly even if there are simultaneous readers. Okay, we'll stop there.